ready to go on to one of our featured attractions. Of course, you're all featured attractions. Carol Burnett, and this interview was done by Mr. Greg Van Beek. Thank you all from Project Audion. And Greg, you want to talk about, how this all came together? I tried to get her last year and that didn't work out, and you had the magic touch this year. So tell us about it.
Well, it actually came about because of Steve Darnell, the guy who hosts Those Were the Days on WDCB radio in Chicago. Back in January of 2022, he had Carol on his program, and she was talking about the work she did with Gary Moore. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. He had Carol Burnett on his show. So I was associated with him a little bit on social media. So I reached out to him and congratulated him and asked him if there's any way that I could get an email address for her rep, because I was pretty heavily involved for several decades now with the Bing Crosby fan club, and I wanted to talk to her about her work with Bing. And so he gave me the address, the email address, and said, no guarantees, but the worst you can do is say no. So I sent an email off to the rep, and she said, yeah, Carol would love to do that. And 2 days later, I got a phone call from Carol Burnett. That was February 2nd of last year. So we did a nice 20-minute long interview on Bing Crosby. So fast forward up to October of last year, and Walden reached out to me and asked if I would try to get an interview with Carol about Jack Benny for the Benny convention. And I said, sure, why not? I'll give it a shot. So the same thing, sent an email to the rep, and she said, well, Carol's working right now. Why don't we wait a few months and try to schedule something then? So I thought, oh, this one's not going to happen. So I said, okay, I'll get in touch with you after the first of the year. So I did. After January 1st, I contacted her again, and lo and behold, she agreed to it. So the interview you're about to hear took place on January 12th of this year. And, talking with Carol Burnett, you forget who you're talking to because her voice is so familiar. It sounds like it feels like you're talking with an old friend. Strangely, I wasn't nervous talking to her. And in fact, the first time we talked, she was calling on a cell phone. The cell phone broke up, and all I could hear her saying was, hello, hello, hello. And I finally got through, and I said, Carol, would you mind calling back on a landline? And so she hung up and said, okay, sure, I will. And I thought, well, that'll be the end of that. She won't call back. And well, sure enough, she did. A minute later, she called back, and I said to her, all I was hearing was you in the background saying, hello, hello. And I had a flashback, I said, to the intercom scene with Mrs. Wiggins and Mr. Tudball. And she just roared with laughter. And she just genuinely thought that was funny. And I thought, wow, this is kind of turning the tables. Here's somebody who made me laugh all these years, and I was able to make her laugh with something that a mishap that happened because of the interview. So that's basically how it all came about.
Fantastic. I envy you this opportunity to have talked with her. So, okay, anything else we need to talk about before?
She seems to be more interested in talking about other people that she worked with more than herself. I suppose that anyone who interviews her naturally wants to talk about, Carol Burnett's show and Harvey and Tim and everybody. I imagine she gets a little tired of rehashing the same stories over and over, but talking about some of the people that she had an opportunity to work with, I think she really enjoys. And I was very fortunate to be able to talk with her twice. I never thought this would have come about. She doesn't do Zooms. I tried to get her to do a Zoom interview, but she doesn't do Zoom. So I had to settle for a phone call. So you won't physically see her, but you'll hear her.
Okay. Excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Well, Zach, do you want to go ahead and play the interview?
Well, Carol, it is indeed an honor to speak with you again. I'd just like to begin by welcoming you to the 2023 Jack Benny Virtual Convention. We're honored to have you be a part of this online global gathering of Jack's family members, friends, and fans.
Oh, thank you so much. I was really, I just adored him. He was very special and very sweet to me.
What are some of your earliest memories of Jack? Did you listen to his radio program each Sunday evening as a young girl?
Yes, my grandmother and I used to listen to Jack's show, and more recently, when I'm in the car, if I turn on I put the radio on, and I hear Jack's show again, and I must say it holds up. Some of the other shows that I used to listen to with my grandmother in the 40s and 50s, you hear them today, they're not as funny as you thought they were. But
Right.
Jack's show, actually it holds up. It's absolutely as fresh and funny today as it was when he first recorded it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and it's interesting to compare Jack's program with that of Fred Allen, whose program was equally as popular as Jack's. But listening to Fred today, it just doesn't hold up as well as Jack's program, and I often wondered if it was because Fred's program was a little bit more topical. His humor was more of the time than on Jack's program.
Yeah, that's a part of it too. That's true. But even though I still say there might be some that aren't topical, but they're just not as funny.
Right.
As they were back then, to people. Yeah, but Jack's, as I said, I'm repeating myself, his show holds up today.
Yes, it does, and his show really gave birth to the ensemble cast of characters with Don Wilson, Phil Harris, Mary, Dennis Day, and of course Rochester.
Well, yes, and he wasn't afraid to share. That's the mark of a really good showman, was that he wanted his team to score. Everybody. He would play straight man to Dennis Day.
That's right.
and that's the way it should be. I remember I learned that from working with Gary Moore. He would share, and I used to watch the Sid Caesar show, and Sid would let Howie Morris and Carl Reiner, shine, and and that's what I did with my show. Many times I would play straight man to Tim Conway, or or Harvey, or we even though my name was on the Carol Burnett show, it was an ensemble piece, and
Right.
I learned that way back, and I realized that even back then, as you said, that's the way Jack Benny was, and that just made his show better.
Did you ever meet some of the cast from Jack's radio show in later years, like Phil Harris or Mary or Dennis Day?
No, I never did. I never did. Just Jack. And I remember I did his show a couple of times. And
Right.
it was in 1962, and he was at the time 67 years old. Yeah, 66, 67 years old. And that's what I remember. But he didn't seem that old at all.
Right, he didn't seem 39, but he certainly didn't seem 67 either, right?
Not at all. I think I told you when we were doing it, we did a sketch where it was Tarzan and Jane,
Yes.
and they'd been married for 20 years, and so he'd just gone right to pot. So Jack was in this awful Tarzan outfit, it was very funny, and he wanted the character as Tarzan. He wanted to play ball with these huge boulders that were, they were fake, but they looked like they were heavy boulders back in the prehistoric time. So as Jane, I threw the boulder to him, and Jack caught it and fell backwards into some prop bushes that they had on the set, that looked like a jungle. And we had an audience. There was an audience, student audience, and I looked, and he had cut himself on his hand on one of those bushes, those fake bushes, and the blood was streaming down his arm. And he did not stop. He continued with the sketch. He kind of wiped the blood away on his loincloth or whatever it was, and kept on going with the sketch. And he didn't tend to the cut on his hand until after the sketch was over. He didn't want to stop the momentum that we had with the studio audience.
That's incredible. I don't think you'd find that today on the set of any show. I think if somebody got a paper cut, they'd probably be off to see the medic.
I don't think so, no. But
no.
I think it's on YouTube, and if the the audience, if you tune into YouTube and you see the Tarzan sketch, look for that when he gets out from behind, under those bushes, because he's kind of hiding his arm, hiding
Yes.
his hand.
You
Yeah.
can see when he gets up, you can see him looking down at his thumb.
Yeah. Oh, so you've
he
seen
cut
it.
I just
Yeah.
watched it last night, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
It's
the whole-
amazing.
So it's safe to say that Jack firmly believed in the old show business adage, the show must go on.
That's right. That's how I felt with my show. We never stopped. You know, unless the scenery fell down and knocked us in the head, we kept going. And even though there might be mistakes, I just like the idea of having it be live, and the studio audience was very important to me, to keep them happy and not sitting around waiting for us to take our time to change scenery or costumes or anything like that, because if they got bored, they didn't give us the response that we need. You know, so
Right.
I just wanted to do it like a Broadway show as much as possible and just keep going, you know.
And I suspect Jack's show was set up in a similar vein as well.
Mhm. Yeah, no, he had a studio audience, and it was great because we would do the show and we'd be out of there in an hour. Now today, I've done guest shots on sitcoms that are 22 minutes of show, right?
Right.
And at times they go like 4 or 5 hours to tape. And this is insane. It's not necessary. It's like they're trying to make a movie or something. And the studio audience gets bored. And so sometimes they leave halfway through, and then they bring another fresh audience in to watch the second half of the 22 minutes. It's just, it's not show business, let me put it that way. You might as well not have a studio audience.
Exactly.
And I've seen them where they deliver pizza to the audience
Oh,
to
my.
keep them happy.
Just bribing them with food, yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, stay, please. Here's a slice of pizza.
Oh, that's funny. I know you mentioned to me previously when you were growing up that you and your grandmother would spend a lot of time at the movie theater. Do you recall seeing any of Jack's films back in the 40s, like the infamous Horn Blows at Midnight, or the To Be or Not to Be with Carol Lombard?
I don't remember seeing him that much as a kid. My grandmother she would go for Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, stuff like that. And no, I didn't see To Be or Not to Be until I was an adult. You know,
Right.
and I thought he was wonderful. That was a very funny movie.
It was. It still holds up well today.
Yeah, but I didn't. He wasn't in my thoughts. You know, when I would go to see the movies, it wasn't that Jack Benny was a movie star.
Right.
He was a radio star. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we know how you first became aware of who Jack was, but I'm wondering if you know how Jack first learned of who you were, perhaps from the Gary Moore show?
It was the Gary Moore show. Yeah, and
Okay.
so I was on hiatus, and he called my agent and said, "Yeah, we'd love to have Carol on the show." I said, "Absolutely." I mean, oh man, to work with Jack, you know, it was so funny because I would think if my grandmother had been alive, she would have just been in heaven, knowing that I was working with Jack Benny.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was it was quite a thing to grow up watching him, and then actually he became a friend. You know, and he was so nurturing, and you know there was nothing aloof about him or conceited or anything like that. He loved to laugh.
He was a great laugher, yes.
He was a good audience. You know,
right.
If you do something that was funny, he was the first person to slap his knee. You know, go, damn, that's funny. You know?
So that was really the first time you met Jack, was when you did his show in '62.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, having heard and read some interviews that Jack's radio writers did over the years, they all seem to say that Jack was very adamant that once the script was set and they were doing the show, that he didn't like to have a lot of ad-libs going on that he didn't know about, that he liked to stick right to the written word. Is that kind of how you found Jack to be when you worked with him? Was he kind of a stickler for sticking right to the script?
No, it wasn't. Not that I ad-libbed, but I
Right.
didn't feel that, I didn't feel constricted or anything in any way where he might say up front, "Now we've got to stick to the script." That never occurred to me.
Oh,
I
good.
mean, he never did that when I was around. Yeah, I was lucky with my writers. We would ad lib and do stuff constantly, and our
Sure.
writers would say, "Look, if you can make it funnier, be our guest." They weren't married to the script, which I was very grateful for.
That's a great way to do it, yes. Well, after Jack introduced you on that first show, you asked if you could do a little number that you worked out with his orchestra, which turned out to be the stripper of all things. And was
Right.
that your idea to do that? Or?
Yeah. Well, I had done the stripper before on a special that I did where I was the charwoman,
Okay.
who was coming in after hours to a burlesque house to clean up the stage, and mop the stage and so forth. And then she imagines that she hears the stripper, and so she does a mock striptease pretending that she was Gypsy Rose Lee. So that's how that came about. And then Jack had seen that, and then he thought, well, that'd be fun, to do with the Tarzan yell. So, and that's how that happened.
It worked out great because it's sort of a running gag throughout the whole show, even into the Tarzan sketch you wound up doing it.
Right.
And Jack stops and he says, "Carol," he says, "there's women and children watching." And you said, "Well, this will keep the fathers watching too."
God, I forgot that. Right, yeah. Oh.
And you actually sang a lovely song after that. You did Judy Garland's "The Trolley Song," which was must have been a favorite of yours.
It was, and she was too. It was an homage to Judy. I mean,
sure.
Nobody could sing it like she could, though.
No.
But getting back to the Tarzan sketch, that must have been one of the first times, if not the first time, that you did your famous Tarzan yell on television.
Right, it was one of the first times. The first time I ever did it was on Gary's show.
Okay.
I did it, yeah. But but I did do it on Jack's show also. Yeah, I just from thinking over and I slipped my mind. I'll think about it.
Okay.
Well, you made a return appearance on Jack's TV show the following year in 1963, and it wasn't terribly common for Jack to have the same guests on more than once on his weekly series, at least in the 60s. I just looking down the list of some of the people he had on, so that in itself is a good indication that he was obviously quite fond of you.
He was, and we were fond of each other, definitely. Yeah, he was. Yeah, and I was thrilled to be asked to be back. That was the boat.
The riverboat, yes.
Yeah, the riverboat. Yeah.
Don Wilson played your father and ends up with Jack shooting both you and Don at the same time.
Right.
What are some of your memories of working with Don Wilson? He was certainly someone who was right there from practically the beginning with Jack on radio and all the way through television all those years.
Just wonderful. I mean, it was a family. He had a family, and everybody was loose. Nobody was uptight. Nobody was nervous or anything. It was just, let's get in the sandbox and have fun. And that's what it was.
And unfortunately, on neither of the shows that you were on with Jack, the great Eddie Rochester Anderson didn't appear, which is a shame. Did you ever get to meet him?
No, I didn't. That was that was one thing that I was sorry about, that I did not get to meet him, because he was so funny too. They all knew how to do it,
Oh, they certainly did. And in looking through the staggeringly long list of legendary names and guest stars that appeared on your weekly series over the years, I didn't see Jack's name on there, unless I missed it. Did Jack ever appear on your show?
No, I think, when did Jack pass away?
1974, almost 50 years ago.
Oh, wow. No, we didn't have him. I think he was kind of retired or something. I don't think he was going to do he was going to do Sunshine Boys,
That's right. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
he died, and so they got George Burns.
Hmm. Do you
Yeah.
remember how you learned of Jack's passing?
Well, just with everybody else, I think it was on television. I
Right.
saw it. Yeah, yeah,
It was right after
Yeah.
Christmas.
yeah. What a dear
Oh.
man.
Well, before I let you go, Carol, I have to ask, and I know if you're involved with it, it's not something you can divulge too much about, but I heard there's a group of fans, I think on Facebook, who are petitioning to have you host an episode of Saturday Night Live. Are you aware of this, and is that something that you're trying to work out?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
Okay. Because they did the same thing with Betty White, and I think when she
Right.
appeared because of that.
Yeah, no, I really have no interest.
Okay. No, that's
Yeah.
good to know because there was some buzz about that for a while. I thought, well,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
okay.
You know, it's very nice, very sweet, but I'm happy where I am.
Well, that's the main thing. That's great to hear.
Right.
And I want to thank you again, Carol, for being so generous with your time and for being
Greg.
a guest on our Jack Benny virtual convention. I'd just like to ask you if there's anything you'd like to say in closing to Jack's family and friends and family that are gathered here today.
Well, just that you know, I guess, well, I'm one of his biggest fans still to this day. And again, I'm just grateful that I got to work with him and I got to know him and that we got to be friends.
And I think that says it best.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you again, Carol. We're honored to have you and also
Thank you,
glad
Greg.
to have had this time together with you.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good one. Okay.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thank you again, Carol.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Greg. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful interview. Thank you so much, Greg, for getting that interview for us. Really appreciate it. Everybody give some virtual applause for Mr. Greg Van Beek.
Woohoo!
Thank you. It was certainly an honor to talk with her, and that you were so giving for 20 minutes just to talk about one person is quite remarkable.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was interesting going back and trying to listen to it and get some beats going about can we put in here in place of no video, and it ended up being a nice trip down memory lane for the Jack for those Jack appearances, and the Tarzan episode is an eternal thought. Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Larry Groby, you didn't need to grow that many hands. But no, I'm so delighted that you're able to grab that for us, and Greg, you have no idea how much everybody here in this room and how much everybody on the Facebook feed watching right now really appreciates the hard work you put in getting this interview done. Like, thank you so very much.
Well, I thank Walden and Steve for making it possible, because that's how it all began. You know, it takes several people to make something like this happen, and they are the ones who made it possible.
It doesn't surprise me that the name Walden Hughes came up in that thank you.
You know, if you have time, I can show you something here that's kind of a prized possession of Jack
we've
Benny.
got a
It's kind of
quick second
reminded me what Laura did before she had the cigarette box. Well,
Yeah,
I have a
please.
box too. It's a little green box here,
What is it?
and it says Jack Benny on it,
Oh my God.
1870. Any
I
guesses
know
on
what it is.
Laura knows what it is.
Yeah.
Laura, what's
Go-
in the
go for it,
box?
Greg.
Are you ready? Big reveal.
Oh no.
Oh, yes.
No.
Oh yes.
No.
Well, Jack's toupee.
Oh my God.
And I think you wore this on the Lawrence Welk show. The way it looks, seeing that show, it looks the same color.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those later ones. In the Neil Gaiman interview tomorrow night, you'll hear him talk about Jack putting shoe polish on his hair, and I don't know that that's necessarily shoe polish, but and it's not his hair. Well, I guess it's hair that belonged to him, but
But
you know.
underneath, it actually has his name and address.
Oh wow!
You wouldn't lose it. There's still the stick pins in here holding it on. I don't want it to fall off of here, but
Jesus Christ.
I'm just
Oh my
I wrote
God.
down the fellow's name. It's Siegfried H. Geikie with an Encino address. And I looked his name up on Google, and he was a Hollywood makeup artist. I got this thing at least 15 years ago. I found it on eBay, of all places.
Wow.
And the address listed for Jack inside is 9908 Santa Monica Boulevard, Beverly Hills.
Oh,
that
that's
address
when he was in Century City.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's what it says on the bottom of it.
How come it is I always find the same stock photograph of Jack when I look on eBay, but when Greg looks on eBay, he finds the wig?
Well, and surprisingly, it wasn't that expensive either at the time. And back then, eBay hadn't taken off like it has today. But
My God.
some people see this and they're totally creeped out by it, and the other people think it's the ultimate Jack Benny collectible. So, whichever camp you fall into, I guess.
Can it be both? I mean,
Can be both, I guess. A little creepy.
when you really think about it, it's like Tim Burton. It's a blend of the macabre but the acceptable.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Greg.